from the side of the department. I also know that the MEC from Free State has indicated that she's running late, she's on her way, and I'm seeing somebody running, coming in. You would think that she is a student. She looks like a school girl. She's the CEO of SASCOC, Ms. Nozipo Chafta. Thank you for being here. The president of SASCOC is here because remember, SASCOC is the custodian of the sports in the country. So there's nothing that we can do without them. Actually, they have been the one that have been continuing asking us, when can we have this Indaba? Because they actually wanted to make sure that they can share with us what they think should happen. I know that all the federations from SASCOC, President Barry Hendricks are here, and at a certain point in time, we will see but I know that all of them are represented. I also want to acknowledge the fact that not only the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee of Sports, Arts and Culture is here, but a sizable number of the members of the Portfolio Committee are here. I can tell you that Honorable Mhlongo is here, Honorable Lutuli is here, Honorable Adams is here. You can see I'm calling honorables now. Honorable Zondi is here, Honorable Malomane is here, Honorable Tutusibia is here, Honorable Mtetwa is here. So you can see that everybody is taking this Indaba very serious because it's one of our priorities. I don't want, of course, the acting DG with the entire team that have made us to be here today, I know that they are here. But I also want to tell you that we felt that let's go beyond the borders. The CEO of Region 5, because we are part of Region 5, is here to make sure that the event is actually replicated even in the neighboring countries, because we want to make sure that we're building the blocks that are needed. Everybody understands and knows that when we talk about school sport, we're talking about making sure that we unearth that talent at an early age and we are able to nurture them and make sure that when we see them as champions later in life, you actually get comfortable to know that you played a role in making sure that that pathway that they now made them to be champions, you've done well on it. We are aware that there is corporates that are here. At some point during the breakaways, you will see them, those that have played a critical role in the sporting fraternity in the country, and those that would want to come in and join. We want to make sure that we have more corporates that are coming. But I know that Nedbank has confirmed that they would be here. I also know that all those companies that have been clear, Momentum for the side of the women in sport, Telkom, they are here because they want to make sure that they are part of the history in making sure that this Indaba is a success. Thank you very much for being here. We know that the unions, the education unions are here because there will be no school sport without unions buying into it. We want to appreciate the fact that you took the time to be here. Thank you so much. And I also know that the broadcasters are actually here because they understand. As I am speaking, the ambassador, the High Commissioner from Jamaica is just walking in. Can you welcome her? Thank you very much, my sister, for making the time to come in. So that's the people that are in the room. What we are going to do is to actually agree that all of us here, we have the same vision. We understand what are we here to do. We also agree that all of us that are here, we want and we love this country so much that we want this Indaba to be a success. We are going to make sure that whatever we are told that we must do, we will do. When we go to the breakaway room sessions after lunch, 5 of them, we will divide ourselves and make sure that all our organizations are well represented in all the breakaway rooms so that your voice is heard in all the breakaway rooms, so that your ideas and thoughts make it into what ultimately would be the outcome of this. Thank you so much for coming. You are warmly, warmly welcome. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much to the Deputy Minister. Her kind words, the ability to come forward, step forward, and welcome everybody who's here in the room, and also just give the magnitude of why we are here today. As we said that in different formations prior, there were promises that were made, and you and I will agree that some of those promises were never ever met. So here now, given the landscape of, especially the honorables, as the Deputy Minister was calling them, who are here, again cementing how sport in this country is likely to shape up. The Minister of Sport has come in together with his team in a very critical year in sport, where we've seen the women in cricket in a World Cup situation. We've seen the women in football in a World Cup situation. We're seeing currently rugby in a World Cup situation. There'll be cricket. Basketball has just finished happening. Where are we? How are we bringing all of those kids and their involvement in schools where they're supposed to be nurtured, so that we don't have this hole where we say, where are we going to find the next Akani Simbini, where are we going to find the next Juan Vermeulen and so on, is that we need to understand that it starts in the schools. And that is why today is so, so important. Please help me bring on stage and to introduce again warmly in a sporting manner our next speaker, ladies and gentlemen, who's going to set aside the purpose as well as the objectives of why we are here. Our ADG, Dr. Cynthia Khumalo.
Program Director, Robert Marawa. Allow me to take this opportunity to acknowledge, as Deputy Minister has indicated, acknowledging the Minister of Sport, Arts and Culture, Mr. Goodenough Noncedo, Ncediso. Goodenough Ncediso, Godwa. Deputy Minister of Sport, Arts and Culture, Miss Nokawe. Now there is no Ncedo. There is a Ncediso and a Noncedo, Robert. It's quite difficult. You can imagine then recognizing the Minister Ronald Lamola of Justice and Correctional Services. And in case you were wondering why out of all the ministers he made sure he was here, we are going to outline to you the objectives and the outcome of this sports Indaba. You do not comply, Minister Lamola will take over. So that becomes important that we highlight that. So just please make sure you listen to what we're going to say here, especially talking to the objectives and the outcomes. We've got your name, you are registered. High Commissioner of Jamaica and all the dignitaries that are connected online from Russia, India, UK, and other countries. Mr. Perry Hendricks, President of SASCOC, together with the CEO and other leaders within SASCOC. Members of the Portfolio Committee of Sport, Arts and Culture, led by the Chairperson Umama Ubeauty Dlulane. MECs of sport that are present here as acknowledged, MECs of education that might be present physically or online. We want to acknowledge the executive members of the federations, both national and provincial, sport personalities that are present here, senior government officials from national and provincial departments, various teacher unions present, various school governing bodies, members of the general public, including parents that could be connected online, members of the media, members of the sport fraternity, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed my pleasure and honor to be part of this historic moment of our school sport program, as the program director has also indicated quite succinctly. The memorandum of understanding that was signed between the Department of Sport and Recreation, former Department of Sport and Recreation, and the Department of Basic Education in 2018 ended in May 2023. Now, during this time, we have experienced a merger between the two former departments, that is the Department of Arts and Culture together with the Department of Sport and Recreation, into the now known department known as Department of Sport, Arts and Culture. We also saw during this time the advent of COVID-19 that had a major impact on so many lives, and school sport was not spared the devastating consequences of this pandemic. Despite the challenges of the reorganization of the two departments and dealing with the aftermath of COVID-19, we continue as a department to emphasize that the school sport program is the bedrock of sport development in the country. And as Deputy Minister indicated, when Minister Kodwa arrived, that is the key message and the vision that he was sharing, not just with us as the officials in the department, but also with a number of stakeholders that he has been meeting since March when he took office. We remain committed, therefore, to maximizing access to sport, recreation, and physical activity in South Africa, and also rolling out functional sport in schools. This program will indeed remain the flagship program in the department. It is therefore for this reason that we have defined the theme of this historic school sport Indaba as a move towards an integrated and united school sports system. I'll repeat. Towards an integrated and united school sports system. And you will hear a lot about this today and tomorrow. Therefore, Minister, Deputy Minister, Program Director, the objectives of this school sport are very clear. We want to evaluate the progress made in the implementation of the school sport program in this country to date, and to determine the effectiveness of the model implemented. We are mindful of the constraints. However, we would like to determine the priorities for a school sport, and as we do so, we must be able to allocate the resources in accordance with the set priorities. Thirdly, determining with clarity the role and the responsibilities of various stakeholders. As acknowledgements were being read out, we had mention of a lot of stakeholders that are here. All of them are critical in playing this role and delivering against this theme that we just read out. So as we deliberate, let us review the current school sport model and its implementation and recommend a new implementation model and protocol. We must also reflect and assess how far we have come to address issues of access and equity in sport through various initiatives undertaken in schools. Our deliberations must also lay the foundation for the review of the existing National Sport and Recreation Plan. Minister, we are convinced that a successful rollout of the school sport program in South Africa relies, amongst others, and these, what I'm just going to go through quickly now, is what today's discussion is going to focus on, but also the commissions. As we break into commissions, we're going to be focusing on. So therefore, as the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture, we are recognizing the school sport program in South Africa as relying on the following: clear policy directives regarding the provision of sport in the country and within schools, and a clear alignment between policy and implementation. School sports being treated, secondly, school sports being treated as a priority and being offered at all schools in South Africa. Thirdly, school sporting codes being launched and supported at all levels of the system. The fourth point, school sport leagues being implemented through vibrant school sport structures and sport codes, committees and all schools participating, as we indicated on the first point. Physical education being implemented in all schools. Fifth point, all stakeholders present here continuously creating best practices regarding the implementation of sport programs in schools. And last but not least, to ensure that we promote patriotism amongst learners. As I conclude, Program Director, I wish to encourage all stakeholders to ensure that when we conclude this Indaba, we should be able to have the following: establish the new guidelines to draft a compact with all the stakeholders who make a meaningful contribution to the sports programs in schools. Develop the guidelines that will help us to drive a new implementing model that we spoke about and the protocols for sport in schools. Clearly outline the roles and responsibilities, and I'm reiterating this, clearly outline the roles and responsibilities of stakeholders in the provision of sporting opportunities for learners in schools. So it's all about those learners in our schools. Define and clearly integrate the priorities for the school sports sector. Led by I nearly said that name again. Led by the Minister, Kodwa, we are saying as a department, the National Department of Sport, Arts and Culture, no country can ever be successful if it doesn't take care of the young people. They are the future, and this program affords an opportunity to showcase their talents. We truly believe that we will have a successful Indaba that will help us shape the fortunes of the learners and improve the quality of opportunities that we provide. Thank you, Program Director. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to the Acting Director General giving us an outline. But most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, our job is cut out for us now, isn't it? I saw people frantically writing notes. That's encouraging because it's a big duty that we have to carry out. There's accountability, there's deliverables that have to be made. And I think that was very clearly laid out. So thank you again, Dr. Cynthia Khumalo, for being on the stage. And the merger of school sport is exactly that. It's school and it's sport. Education and sport. And that is why later on, though, we'll have representation from the departments within sport to step forward and chat to us. You look at current champions around the world. You look at the beginning stages of a Tiger Woods. Who was there? A father. There's parental support right throughout. So from a schooling situation, you understand that you need the visibility of a parent to be there. You look at the Williams sisters, who is there physically present at the time was the father. So again, the visibility of a parent. Recently, US Open champion Coco Gauff, who was there? The father was there. The mother was there. The parental support, the reference to the parents. But where does it start? It starts at school with those journeys that begin. So it's no rocket science. Even our very own Sim Tiger Shabalala here in South Africa as a golfer, who's next to him all the time, traveling around the world. The father's there. The mother's there as a support system. So what's our excuse in terms of not doing this? What's our excuse in terms of kids coming back and saying, we are sorry, we can't help you. We don't have soccer in these schools. Why don't you have soccer in those schools? Why don't you have certain sporting codes in those schools? Who is stopping that from happening? And I think that our brilliance as a sporting nation relies on where it begins. And I think the parental support also is highly, highly important. Let's bring a man on stage, ladies and gentlemen, from the sporting sector. And obviously we get guidance from SASCOG. We get guidance in terms of where we're going, where we sit, and the list of achievements that we've either had or we're still going to have. That duty falls in the hands of Mr. Barry Hendricks. He is the SASCOG president. Let's give him a warm welcome, ladies and gentlemen.
Wow, good morning, everybody. It has been since 2011 that I saw a forum packed with so much expertise and so much experience. 2011 was when we had the National Sports and Recreation in Indaba. And 12 years on, we now have a group of people in front of us that's going to determine the way forward for school sports in the future. Let me greet the Minister of Sport, our boxer. Let me greet the Minister of Justice, our cyclist. Let me greet Lulane, Chair of the Portfolio Committee, our netballer. All the other members of the Portfolio Committee, all the MECs, all the national presidents, all the department officials from provincial to national level, all the provincial sports confederations presidents and members of the executives, and all the others that are here today. Kathsita is here today as well. It's wonderful to see that linkage being brought together, as well as the High Commissioner, ma'am. I look forward to chatting to you as well. Jamaica has produced a wealth of international champions, and we need to learn from those international good models so that we can grow as well. This is, of course, an historic occasion, and in the 10 minutes that I've been given, I'm going to try and lay out what SASCOG's position is, as well as the support that we are going to supply. I mustn't forget the SASCOG board members and the CEO and staff that's also here to enable us to capture what you're going to be saying to us today so that we can apply it into our holistic development program. This is, of course, historic. In 1993, we had the Vision for Sports Conference in Midrand. That charted the way forward for a program called Proteus Sport. Then we had the National Sports in Indaba in 2011, and that brought about the National Sports and Recreation Plan that was in fact incorporated into the National Development Plan. Whether those plans worked is something that we need to deliberate on during today. Can we say that all aspects of school sports that we find in the National Development Plan and in the National Sports and Recreation Plan has been achieved? And what can we do to learn from those mistakes so that we can develop another better policy document and another better program of action to get school sports up and running, not only in the private and Model C schools, but also in the government schools. Not only in high school, but in grade R and primary school and high school. So you have a huge task ahead of you, all of you with your wealth of knowledge in front of us. The wealth of knowledge and experience is very, very curious though. Could I ask for anyone who is below 40 to put their hands up? Below 40. Thank you. Minister, I'm sorry. Well, that exercise is simply there to show you that when we did the 1993 Vision for Sports Conference, we were youngsters then. And we need to see more youngsters here in forums such as this. We need to bring those young teachers on board. We need to bring them with us so that they can learn and be mentored and tutored around the issues of sports administration, so that they can be like you, to sit in the future and guide us even further, because we are not going to be there forever. We therefore have an aging administration, and we need to provide a pathway not only for the athletes in schools, but also for the teachers to grow. This program forms part of a holistic program called the Long-Term Athletes Development Program, which incorporates schools development, which incorporates club development, from clubs at local level, to regional level, to provincial level, to national level, to continental level, to international level. We must not forget that there are certain policies already in place that federations have adopted. We must not forget that there's a memorandum of understanding between the DBE and the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture. In other words, we cannot create a new wheel. We must learn from the others and build on it for the future. We need to incorporate the universities, governments, the federations, SASCOC, the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture, and other departments. Minister Lamola, we just had a meeting the other day with your security cluster, where we're going to bring them closer to SASCOC so that they form a better, coherent organization with us, and in fact become part of this development process. Minister, let me thank you first. I'm not closing yet, but let me thank you for the manner in which you've been able to create an environment of trust, of collaboration and working together between ourselves, SASCOC, and the department, with our CEO and your DG, acting DG, as well as between ourselves, as well as with the Deputy Minister of Sport. We have never been on a better wicket in terms of relationships and relationship building with civil society and the Department of Sport. The last conference is clear that in this venue, in fact, where we work together to collaborate with the department to build a better relationship between our federations and them as well. This project forms part of Operation Excellence, our Bidvest Operation Excellence, because about 3 weeks ago in Trinidad and Tobago, a young woman called Alicia Kuno, a young black girl, won gold in 2 field events, in discus and javelin, and in one of those events breaking the junior world record, Commonwealth record. Now that shows that there is talent out there, young talent that is willing to be nurtured so that they can grow to become our future leaders. SASCOC is not looking towards Paris 2024. We're looking way beyond that. LA 2028, as well as Australia in 2032. It takes about 14 years to develop talent. It doesn't happen overnight. If you create the system with us, between the Department of Sport and all the other stakeholders that are here, and the national federations and provincial sports confederations, then when we leave this forum, will we know that we are attempting to create a coherent, common system that we all believe in. There are also other sports that are not included in the government priority sports, such as squash, where we have over 123 events for juniors during the year. We've got to look at that and ask ourselves, is it only the priority codes of sport that are important, or is the other codes of sport also viable? Where does boxing come into this field? Where does karate fit in? Swimming, squash, and a host of other sports that we need to incorporate and entrench into the system. The previous speaker was very clear. Sport is a vehicle for social cohesion and social change. Sport is there to develop our new leaders of the future. Sport is there to create better, successful, confident South African citizens of the future. Let's work together to achieve that goal. We can only do this through education and training, and education and culture. Your mentorship is critical in this regard. Encourage the teachers, encourage the youth, but do so under the safeguarding policies and principles, because that is one of the barriers that are hindering us in terms of our growth. What does SASCOC want to see from this conference? Vision. Visionaries coming through. Ideas that are going to be realistic, but are going to entrench the future of school sport in this country, linking it closely to civil society, and to government. I want to thank the Minister once again for the opportunity to raise these questions and to make these statements in front of this particular august occasion. This event must go down in history. It simply must be regarded as an event where everybody says, I was proud to be part of it because I was there. We must remember that we can only do this together. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Barry Hendricks. Thank you very much for outlining, going back in the 2011 era. And quite interestingly, I actually had a quick read last night about that and just looked at a few notes that were taken at that Indaba. And some of the things that were mentioned then was ensuring successful implementation of intra-school, inter-school, extracurricular, extramural, and co-curricular activities. Also the development and implementation of the school sport policy on an ongoing basis. So, and I'm sure and I hope that as everybody takes to plenary and the different committees, that these will be some of the things that they latch onto to try and have a continuation and that they're not easily forgotten. The presence of the minister from day one, after he was brought into office, had an interview with him, and even without prodding, even without asking the question, he made mention of the issue of school sport. He had observed in his previous line of work, where he had just arrived, where he would, I see someone is awake here. He had mentioned that, as I say, without provocation, that this is going to be one core pillar that he will pursue in his endeavor. The other structures, I won't say he's happy with, but he can see the progress when you start to engage in international sporting activity. But what about school sport? And it is for that that we are here today. And I think let's give him, again, let's pretend we're watching the Soweto Derby. Let's give him a warm welcome, ladies and gentlemen. The Honorable Minister of Sport, Z Gotwa.
I'm not sure about watching Soweto Derby. The next question is which one? But thanks very much, our esteemed program director. You'll be pleased to see and know that I've been advised that you are oversubscribed. That tells you the enthusiasm beyond even people who had indicated that they will be available to come here today. You can see there's a long queue of people almost sitting off rails and off the aisles. And I'll say something about it, that enthusiasm that you see in the country and which is reflected here today. The esteemed program director, the Deputy Minister of Sports, Arts and Culture, Honorable Nokawe Mafu. No, I just want Tiji to listen to this. Somebody's just... Deputy Minister Nokawe Mafu. The Honorable Minister of Justice Lamula, who's here in two capacities, is a cyclist as well as a very young minister. The cabinet today later, when we met in Cape Town, which took a long day, had some comments to make about the significance of this meeting. And the cabinet later today will say something about this meeting. Lamula was among others who contributed and indicated his availability to this meeting. And a number of other ministers, and I won't say their age, because I don't want to say all those who are young, I can be read wrong in the meeting. But many of them indicated that they would love to be here. The members of the portfolio committee led by Usisi Beauty Dlulana would really appreciate your presence as you do oversight on our work. The Jamaican High Commission, as well as a number of other international and countries that are present online. When we had conceptualized this meeting with a dream of a winning nation in mind, we thought we must benchmark ourselves against the best in the world if we were to compete internationally. And there were a number of countries that we identified. Some, unfortunately, could not make it. Some of them are online. One of the unfortunate incidents that always happens in politics, one of the countries invited Honorable Dlulane was Brazil. And as they were preparing to come, the minister got reshuffled. Now it's called politics. I really sympathized. Because we thought some of these successful sporting nations, having read them, they've got a very good foundation of sport and a grassroots sport. We're talking about Jamaica. Who will forget one of the best netball players recently, Fowler? Nobody can forget her. You go to Australia. I'll say something about it later. One of the lessons we learned in Australia, for them to become the best in the world in terms of netball, they appointed a commission with a mandate to develop a blueprint. That blueprint developed a 15-year vision. In that 15 years vision, in 3 years, they reached semifinals of Netball World Cup. I'll say something about it, because again, benchmarking ourselves against international best practices and experiences, we're learning something from countries such as Australia. The UNESCO Chair of Sport Development, Peace, Olympic Education, Professor Marion Kim, leaders of sport federations, commercial and community partners, coaches, teachers, sport players, past and present. Talking about past and present, one of the things that over a period of time we're not doing well as a country is to celebrate our brand ambassadors from a sporting point of view, who represent our country well internationally. Some of whom they get celebrated elsewhere, not in their own home. I see present here Lucas Radebe. Lucas Radebe, I've watched him going to UK, being given standing ovation in UK. But there are many Lucas Radebe back home, like President Barry mentioned, who are not celebrated in South Africa. When you celebrate them, Honorable Beauty Dlulana, you get asked a question. How much was the dinner? That's the first question. There's Honorable Member. There's Honorable Member Mhlongo. How much was the dinner? I will say something about people like Usain Bolt, who became an ambassador of his own country, and government took responsibility of him because he was an inspiration to young people in Jamaica and an ambassador of that country. He became him only and him only, become an asset to the GDP of the country. And these are the things that we are not celebrating, that are not contributing to nation building, but to social cohesion, but also what is called sport tourism. I recently visited a few countries in my 6 months in office. I asked why a lot of people, or Spain has got a lot of tourists, why Jamaica has got a lot of tourists. There's something that has to do with sports, arts, and culture people that invites people to those countries. And we in South Africa, we're not celebrating those achievements. the acting DG and officials of the department, and other luminaries present. In November of year 2011, sports luminaries, activist leaders, sport administrators, civil society, public and private sector representatives gathered at Kalaka Estate to chart a new way for the transformation of South African sport. The sport representatives at this National Sport and Recreational Indaba played a pivotal role in developing a national sport and recreational plan, the groundbreaking transformation charter. We take our hats off to those present at that Indaba, which came at a time in which the country, particularly the sporting sector, was at war in itself over the counterproductive, archaic and mechanistic quota system. Today, we're here to attest to the correctness of your visionary leadership that first sought to convince society to resist the temptation of looking at sport administration and transformation with eyes of numbers game. By doing so, you introduce a change from quantitative to qualitative change in dialect. This saw the renewed focus in grassroots sports development and the organic evolution of sports structures within investment in both material and human resources. You found that for South Africa to realize the dream of a non-racial, non-sexist and democratic society, we need the agency to design and implement a system predicated on a philosophy of among other dimensions outlined in the Transformation Charter, which outlines 4 things. 1, the provision of sports infrastructure and facilities. 2, breaking barriers to access. 3, increasing participation. 4th and lastly, promoting representation and equity. I quote one of my predecessors who said in 2015, and I quote him, "The Transformation Charter is a lodestar of the sport movement that draws our attention to the immediate and inevitable need for sport transformation for both moral and strategic imperatives." He continues to say, morally because it is the right thing to do, considering the grave injustices of the past, and strategically because of the reality that 84% of the country's under 18 population grouping are black African, while only 16% is white, colored, and Indian, close quotes. He went on to say, to ignore this reality, to ignore this tragic reality from a sustainability perspective alone would be suicidal. Thus, the reason for sport organization to transform rapidly has not only become compelling, but had become fundamental. One of the consequences of national sport and recreational Indaba was the revival of school sport structures. The revival of school sport, particularly in economically marginalized communities, for disenfranchised youth and disadvantaged families, would be driven on the bedrock of a vibrant national school sport program. This was said in 2011 by some of you who are present here today for this game-changing moment for South African school sport. You correctly envisaged then the National School Sport Program as a fulcrum around the sports development should take place from grassroots level to talent identification, talent development, up to high performance and elite sport. Over a decade has passed since 2011, and we gather here for the next 2 days to take stock of the road traveled since the adoption of the National Schools Program. Have we achieved what our forebears set to achieve? I ask a question. If not, what are the reasons for those failures? Or what are the reasons for our failures? Or what may appear to us as successes? We still preside over a divided and ill-defined sports system characterized by fissures of our past. We have no universal access to facilities. According to the EPG report of 2018, the school sport competition system is currently indicating that there are 3 streams from which talent is identified and competition is staged. This system is currently not integrated and it has some challenges. The system shows that there is a government-run school sports system. Then there is one model where former Model C schools and private schools compete. This is where most athletes are identified. And then there is a system which the federations used to stage tournaments and select national athletes. The athletes competing in the government-run sports system come from more than 23,000 public schools, majority of which are previously disadvantaged with poor or no sport facilities in place. These are athletes whose system of competition is poorly organized and do not have proper coaching support. The second group of athletes are athletes from former Model C schools, including private schools, which are properly resourced with world-class sports facilities and proper coaching support. The last group of athletes are athletes competing in federation stage tournaments, most of whom must have means to attend these events, majority being from former Model C schools. And upon successful competition, these athletes are awarded the national colors and may be eligible for selection into academies and other age national teams. I ask a question again. Why has the Memorandum of Understanding between the Department of Arts and Culture and the Department of Basic Education not yielded the desired results? Dare I say, we as all stakeholders have failed learners and young people at schools and out of school. And therefore, we need a theory of change. We need to clearly spell out how school sport is supposed to work, why it will work, and the conditions required for its successful implementation, as indicated by previous speakers. This school sport Indaba gathers under the theme towards an integrated and united school sport program. This Indaba seeks to unify the school sport sector and to develop an innovative and progressive program that will contribute towards an active and a winning nation. And I want us to underline, as we go to discussions, an active and a winning nation as our vision and a dream of a winning nation. Development of vibrant school program is vital for a winning nation. We have gathered here for the next 2 days to reflect on the delivery of South Africa's school sport program and to provide guidelines on a new implementing model and protocols for school sport. Our task as various stakeholders in this school sport Indaba can be outlined as follows: to review and assess the school sport program and to map up a way forward on the requisite policy directives, to determine the role and responsibilities of various stakeholders, to lay the foundation for the review. This is how we have come to describe school sports, arts and culture is hosting this school sport Indaba. The school sport Indaba will grapple and resolve issues such as, not limited to, 1, who should be the drivers of school sport? Building resilient school sport and club sport structures and culture, the role of teachers in holistic development of a child through sport, grassroots development of sport, talent development, and preparing youth for elite sport, elevating sport to be a career of first choice, making the economy of sport our business for sustenance and self-reliance, guiding all sectors in the context of social compact to appreciate and embrace the nexus between commerce and sports development. Lastly, profiling sport through broadcasting and other media. Let me just read that last point, because I saw somebody from SABC. I think I saw MultiChoice. Let me just read in case you missed that point. Profiling sport through broadcasting and other media. Other challenge before this school sport Indaba is to develop a framework for early identification and development of sporting talent. By identifying talent early in school, the youth can have deliberately needed support, mentorship, and resources to make it as a professional sportsman or sportswoman. This implies the government and other stakeholders making budget available to support identified initiatives. I saw our commercial partners, I saw Nedbank, I won't mention the other foundation, which helped us to resolve the Banyana and SAFA. I think there's Standard Bank as well. We would like to invite more of commercial partners. My apologies if I have not recognized some who are present. When looking internationally, it is common to see sports stars in their teenage age and teenage years making their mark in upper echelons of world sport. By way of example, in football, for example, Lionel Messi was already one of the world's best footballers when he was 18 years old. Kylian Mbappe was a World Cup winner and the top goal scorer in 2018 FIFA World Cup at age 19. In swimming, some of the most legendary swimmers in the world, such as Lizelle Jones, were Olympic champions and world record holders in their teenage age. And yes, in South Africa, sometimes we have got it right. For example, in 2007 Rugby World Cup, winning champion Springboks had two 20-year-olds who were already making their mark in the game, J.B. Peterson and Frans Steyn. In the current Bok team, not the bomb squad, a 20-year-old Canan Moody is being talked about as rugby's next big superstar. The Banyana squad, which made history at the 2023 FIFA Women's World Cup, had 7 players who were born in or after the year 2000. The accomplishment of these sports stars in their teenage years shows what the right guidance and support can do to sporting talent. The early identification and development of talent can also prevent us from asking the question, what if? What if they were young? There are some top sporting talents in South Africa who were discovered relatively late by modern standards. By way of example, Bongi Msomi, the captain of South Africa's netball team, the Spar Proteas, only started to play netball when she was age 16. That's old. Khutatso Munjane, the double Grand Slam winning wheelchair tennis star, played tennis for the first time in her final year of high school at age 19. Phumza Maweni, one of the stars of the 2023 Netball World Cup, only started to play netball at national level when she was age 29. At 39 years age, she's still going strong. The question is, what needs to be done? Where to from now? There is a need to invest in development of local expertise through running of sport academies from foundation phase, establish bilateral agreements with other governments for the creation of development opportunities for studies in different sporting fields like sports science, movement science, sports psychology, and lastly, the creation of internship opportunities for graduates in our schools and sport clubs, which explains the point I made earlier, why we invited some of the countries that are present here today. One of the key characteristics of sport, as outlined in the white paper on sport and recreation, program director, is that sport is a facility-dependent activity. I want to repeat that point. Sport is a facility-dependent activity. The logic here is that there is no sport code that could be practiced without an appropriate facility. For this reason, National Sport and Recreation Plan contends that provision and maintenance of facilities forms the foundation of entire sport and recreation system. Therefore, if facilities backlogs are not addressed, it will be difficult to achieve transformation, sport development, and increased participation in objectives in sport. This situation or reality, therefore, requires all stakeholders to put all hands on deck for the future of sport in our country. Only when we collaborate, we'll be able to develop athletes that can successfully compete internationally and reach our goal of being a winning nation. The Department of Arts and Culture has already undertaken to address the challenge of talent identification by building multi-purpose sports courts and outdoor gyms in rural and township communities, which have historically lacked these facilities. As part of legacy projects, the Netball World Cup multi-purpose courts have been built in several communities around the country, including Hammersdale in KwaZulu-Natal, where Bongi Msomi grew up. Work is also being done to build netball courts in Kala Secondary School and Mkeula High School in Kala in the Eastern Cape, where Pumzamaweni went to school. There's much being done, and there's more that needs to be done. As I've said before, government cannot do it alone. I would like to applaud all the commercial and community partners that support the work of government to develop sport at grassroots level. Recently, we celebrated the opening of Pitso Musimane Multipurpose Court at Lufense Girls High School in Orlando East. This was a venture by the Department of Arts and Culture with Nedbank and Sports Trust. This partnership has seen several multipurpose courts being built in under-resourced communities and will continue to be built. During the closing of the Netball World Cup, the President of the Republic, Matamela Ramaphosa, made an announcement of South Africa's government commitment to build a netball arena. I am happy to announce that in consultation with Netball South Africa, I will soon be appointing a commission, among others, to develop a blueprint for the arena, advise me on the establishment of a first ever netball league, the point made by President of SASCOC, Barry. There is no need, and we have no time to reinvent the wheel. We'll look at the best teams in Africa and the Australian model. In this school sport in Indaba, we'll hear from international experiences in school sport. We'll hear of Jamaica's experience in developing a schools program, which has seen the island nation developing some of the most impressive athletes in the history of sport, such as Usain Bolt. We'll also hear from Russia's experience of managing school programs where Russian government has long aligned sport with education and health. In the plenary and breakaway sessions, you'll also hear examples of other countries that have established strong school sport programs, such as New Zealand, Australia, and UK. It will also reflect the expected outcomes of what we must see when driving around townships and villages in terms of playing fields, outdoor gyms, basketball, tennis, and the netball courts. As we go on and establish a blueprint for South Africa's school sport, let us work together as stakeholders in sport and education to build a national sport program that is effective. Let us build a national sport program that can serve as a framework for education, promoting healthy lifestyles, developing talent on and off the field, and making South Africa a winning nation. I look forward to be educated at this Indaba. This must be a different Indaba. The country is looking up to this Indaba. We have no time for lamentation. I'm proud to stand before you as nation builders, because sport is a critical and integral element of nation building and social cohesion. Your presence here is to develop your nation and build social cohesion. I wish you good luck in your discussion. Thank you very much.
I think once again, let's give a big round of applause to the Honourable Minister. I think he set the tone. He has also set the groundwork in terms of what needs to be done here today. And it'll be a miss of me as well, ladies and gentlemen, on this occasion, because we normally see it when we watch television, and it's a little block down the bottom of your screen. And that is where we've assigned our esteemed sign language interpreters in the past. And I think it'll be a miss of me not to take this opportunity. As you can see, the presence right here with us on stage of our sign language interpreters, and that it has been endorsed and it has become an official language in South Africa. South Africa is the 4th country on the continent to do this. They follow Kenya, Uganda, Zimbabwe, as far as recognizing that. So please, ladies and gentlemen, the entire team that is here today, let's give them a big round of applause and appreciation. Our next speaker, in recognizing school sports, but most importantly, physical, Mr. Sfiso Ngobese.
Program Director, thank you very much for the opportunity. And now that the protocol has been established, I am just going to observe it and move ahead so that I do not waste time. And really start by apologizing for the DG, the acting DG, who is going to be joining us late, Minister. He is coming, but he will be joining late, and has really asked that I represent the department in terms of just setting the scene in terms of what currently is obtaining, what are the elements of success in the current model, and the challenges that are there. And we thank you very much, Minister, for your wisdom in making sure that we gather like this as people who have got an interest in school sport and also want to see the changes and also the best working model for our country, because we also want to see our country achieving like many other countries that are achieving in the world. I will immediately go to slide number 3 for those for the one that is controlling our slides. And just to indicate that the Department of Education implements School sport in partnership with the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture through the agreed upon implementation protocol that the two departments signed in 2018, as it was alluded, and that we currently have been working together as two departments in terms of drafting the protocol, because the existing one has expired, but also taking stock in terms of what is it that we want to do, what is it that we want to achieve. And we thank the wisdom of the ministry in terms of before we even open the pages of that protocol together like this, in order to see and hear and listen to all critical stakeholders in the sport fraternity in terms of the direction that we should take and how we can strengthen the program as it is being delivered at this moment. In terms of physical education, currently in the system, the physical education is offered as a curriculum subject housed in the life orientation and life skills curriculum in the basic education sector. And there has been reports that have identified gaps in the teaching of physical education, and there has been some mitigating strategies to improve that, to improve the quality of our physical education. We have had universities assisting us in terms of the research. We have also had our partners who are here as well in terms of capacitating the teachers where gaps have been identified, as well as those of subject specialists. Some of the strategic objectives of the Department of Basic Education is that we definitely need to promote mass participation. And that's an area where, Minister, we have not cracked it yet. I will show now the number and the size and the shape of the basic education system, but also to promote other enrichment programs that enhance social cohesion, as well as cultural identity and talent identification. Also, the improvement of arts, culture, music education, and training in the schools, as well as to facilitate the implementation of physical education, because that is where the first layer of identifying talent actually happens, when those skills are demonstrated during the physical education period. In terms of the basic education as well, we have an action plan to 2030, which is a vision linked to the National Development Plan that we have as a department, and there are 27 goals there. 13 of those goals are just plans in terms of what we want to see by the year 2030. And from goal 13 to 27, it talks about how are we going to reach those goals. So we use this action plan because it anchors on ideas and programs that we want to achieve. As you may see there, that is the shape and the size of the basic education sector. We have got 13.4 million learners in the system. And the question that we need to ask ourselves, are we reaching all those learners? The answer would be a big no. And one of the reasons, or one of the plans, as we will be concluding this Indaba, is to really ask ourselves what else can be done, in the sector by both department and all our partners to ensure that we tap on the talent that we have. We have 447,000 educators in the system, 9 provinces, 75 districts, and over the past 3 years, Minister and Deputy Minister, we have visited all the 75 districts because we want to assess their level of support that they give to the schools. And we have the findings that we will share with this gathering so that together we can look at some of the challenges that are there And I'm glad that it was as if the minister read some of the issues, because I think he was just straight on the point in terms of some of the challenges that are there in the sector. In terms of the current models that we are using, that we have been using, that we are reviewing, is that the Department of Basic Education is really responsible for levels 1 up to 3 in the slide that is up at the moment. You can see there that at a school level, the Department of Basic Education, local level, local competition, as well as at a circuit level. And then from the district right up to the national level, the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture is leading that particular space. And in terms of the way that our school calendar of events has been structured, if we look at the next slide, it basically shows where we have been fitting all the codes that have been identified, the 16 codes. But these are not the only codes that are offered in the schools. Obviously, there are many codes, but government, in looking at the resources that are available, these are the codes that have been prioritized. When schools open in January, the focus is always on the autumn games, because the build-up that comes around March and April is only on athletics at that particular time, as well as swimming, aquatics. So that is where we are. That is how we have been implementing. And then the winter games, the build-up will start around April for the culmination around June, July. And those are the codes that are played during that particular time. The spring games, in terms of the basic education sector, and some of the sponsored tournament that we have included. I will talk about partners later on, and commercial partners that have really assisted in the system in terms of improving, especially in allocation of resources that are really scarce in the basic education sector, because there are so many other competing priorities, as well as the summer games in December. And what would then happen is that schools will prepare themselves earlier for the culmination of the national event, starting at a local level, right up to the provincial, and those that eventually make it at the provincial level will then proceed to the national championship. But we must indicate that in looking at the numbers, because when we look at the number of learners that we have in the system, the worry has always been that the performance and participation is really not touching all learners in our schools. Even in the schools where sport is really played and learners are active, when you look at the number of learners that are participating versus the enrollment of learners in that particular school, clearly it shows that there is a lot of work that we still need to do in order to offer each learner an opportunity to participate. I'm glad that the minister remarked about the issue of facilities, and which is one of the challenges that we have as a system. In terms of bringing in partners in order to support us, especially with the identified gaps when it comes to physical education. We have had a QPE system where teachers were capacitated because of the skills gap that were identified, particularly around the issues of assessment. A lot of teachers in the schools were complaining that they are really experiencing challenges when it comes to assessing learners in physical education. And we have roped in quite a number of partners who came on board to assist the department in terms of capacitating the teachers and assisting our educators to master these skills. And one of such a program that I've just mentioned, without mentioning all others because of time, has been our partnership with the Premier Skills training. Some of the teachers just recently, if you move to the next slide, you will see this was just done in April here in, not here in Pretoria, where around 100 teachers were given these skills in terms of assisting them with coaching, but also starting at a basic level of physical activities that they can do in their schools. We have got quite a number of partners who are assisting us in this particular venture. I'm seeing Mr. Norman Parker because he has also played the role in terms of PAISA. We have also Active Education that have assisted us as the Department of Basic Education in this particular space. And Minister was very, very happy when in Baku, the agreement by majority of the country in terms of accepting the resolutions of MINEPS 7, because it ties in very, very well with some of the programs that we have with the partners, particularly the one that we are having with Milo Nestle in terms of physical education in the primary school, which is called the Future Champs program. It links very, very well with the resolutions of MINEPS 7, especially around the issues of Fit for Life program. And then in terms of our findings in monitoring the 75 districts that we have, education districts in the country, these are some of the challenges that are there in the sector. The issue, for example, of our no fee, because there are schools which we regard in the basic education sector as no fee schools, because those schools that do not collect school fees, and that is where the bulk of our program is lying at the moment. Not that we have not done anything about this. We even at some point approached the National Treasury in terms of trying to access a conditional grant for this particular school so that there could be improvement in terms of sport. Because we know that in the basic education sector, when there is a conditional grant, like for example, school nutrition, then it works because then there is a resource that is allocated and schools take advantage of that, and we see progress on a daily basis because they are able, Minister, to feed 9 million learners on a daily basis. If we can, as a collective, talk about, having a conditional grant for school sport, that will be a step further in terms of realizing the dream that the Minister was just sharing with us. So in terms of also, there is a need for a better coordination. Here we are looking at our structures, being given resources as well in terms of operating and making sure that they coordinate play at a local level. That is something also that is lacking in the system and compromises, the participation of learners. Inadequate number of educators that are trained and developed. If we were to massify with the talent that federations have in this country, if those resources were to be channeled to our educators to equip them and capacitate them, we believe that that would be a step in the right direction. Accessing facilities, I'm not going to speak much because the Minister mentioned this, and these are the things that really make mass participation a challenge. We've been even to the rural schools where, distances between the school is quite a challenge. Even if you're talking about a league, it remains a pipe dream because of the distances between the schools. And in those isolated schools in the farm, in the rural areas, we have been advocating that there should be intra-school leagues, because that is where it should start. When the resources are not there, at least that learners play within the school where they are, because transport might be a challenge. As a first step of making sure that we make provision for as many learners as is possible in terms of participation. And one of the serious challenges that we have as both departments has been the issues around age cheating, which is quite rife, and it's something that is there in this, and I think we also need to, look at it and see. I know we have come up with the different ways in terms of trying to arrest this, but it is really a challenge in this particular, and we know what it will do later in life when a person has been using the wrong name, the wrong identity, and only to find out when they become professional, it's a big challenge. Out of the 622 schools that we have visited this year alone, 622 schools, one thing that we can report is that codes like football, codes like netball, athletics, and to a certain extent, to a greater extent, rugby. Those are the popular codes currently in the majority of our schools. Netball, football, athletics, as well as rugby. But rugby quite strong in the Western Cape as well as Eastern Cape. These are some of the findings that when we were visiting the school. And we have a lot of partners, but for the sake of time, I'm just going to be mentioning two that are really making quite a big, significant contribution in terms of assisting us with the resources. And I would be mentioning the Dreams Field, which is headed by John Pellman. If you can see there, they are really implementing Dream Leagues in areas that are really difficult. You go to a deep rural schools, a school in different provinces, you find a program is in existence and learners are participating, which I think on platforms like this, we need to elevate and applaud organizations such as Dreamfields for the contribution that they are making. Currently, they have enrolled about 52,000 in the Dream Leagues, and they've got quite a number of projects that they are also involved in, and there is a plan to actually massify the program into other areas as well. What I like about the Dreamfield is because they are not just going to places where there are facility. If you can move to the next slide, you will see some of the areas where the programs are actually implemented. In those areas where there are really challenges and schools are isolated and it's in the rural areas, and you can see the mark that is being made there. Other partners that have really supported us in terms of the resources is the Motsepe Foundation, with the 10-year sponsorship agreement that was signed between the Motsepe Foundation as well as the Department of Basic Education. I must also indicate that from the time that it was signed in 2016, Minister, it has been, the monetary award has been increased to 150 million to support the development of football, netball, as well as choral music in the Department of Basic Education. So we can actually see, as you have alluded, as the Minister has alluded, that the bringing in of commercial partners in this space will actually assist the two departments in terms of realizing some of the dreams that we have and the visions that we have. So as part of concluding of my conclusion in terms of some of the recommendations that we are making, is that we really need to have structured capacity building programs for teachers, structured and deliberate, if we really want to make sure that we strengthen the implementation of different codes in different schools. I was, in fact, with the presidential youth employment intervention, indicating that in the current, setup, we shouldn't have a school that does not play chess in the country, resources or no resources, because just when you look at the chessboard itself, the cheapest is around 149 rand, less even than 150. And you don't need a facility because it can be played in a classroom. So there is definitely no excuse why all the schools that are there in the country cannot play chess. And with the young people that have been placed as teacher assistants, 22,000 of them that are responsible for sport and enrichment programs in the current cycle of the Presidential Employment Youth Initiative. One of the initiatives that we have advocated was that all schools must play chess. It must be introduced because you do not need exorbitant resources or playing facilities. It can be played within the classroom. And a yearly predictable calendar that is going to be issued out to all schools to encourage them to register and participate in school sport program. Setting up of functional school sport structures, not just people that are elected there and then they do not coordinate. We want to see the coordination. Capacitate sport and enrichment assistants, I've mentioned this, as well as obviously when we increase the participation, we must also ensure that we also increase in terms of enrolling our teachers and everybody that deals with learners around the safeguarding issue, because it's one of the issues currently that we are responsible for, and we have to make sure that while we play sport, those that have got different agenda do not find part in participating or being close to our learners. A partnership with local government to access the facilities, but also the initiative that we are currently making, Minister, in the basic education is that there is a directorate within basic education which is called LTSM. They are providing books, they are providing all the stationery in schools. Now we want school sport equipment to be classified under LTSM so that schools, when they order their exercise books and books, they can also procure sport and physical education equipment in that catalog. It's one of the things that we have suggested to our colleagues in the LTSM, as well as this one is something that we have tried to say, we understand that the government currently has got challenges in terms of financial resources. But if we can incrementally, maybe start with quintile 1 schools, have a conditional grant for school sport, then the following year we go to quintile 2 schools and quintile 3. We believe that incrementally introducing it like that will yield a positive result for us. That from myself that I thought I should bring in terms, it doesn't cover all the work that my colleagues in the provinces are doing. There are provinces that have really started with the Sport Wednesday, which was launched by the MSCs in the provinces, and we quite applaud that, and we do believe that if we make this deliberate processes, we will really reach the goals that we are trying to set ourselves. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think that's the kind of work that we need to see. Once again, congratulations. Thank you so much. Sfiso Ngobese, delivering on the Department of Basic Education, the presentation there at large. So, Sibonga kakhulu Baba. As a sporting nation, one of the things that we need to do right now, and I'm mindful of time, I think there's about a 30-minute deficit that we need to catch up on. Just something we need to do for 30 seconds. Wherever you are, just quickly. The aircon is nice and pumping. The body's pumping. Get excited about this Indaba, ladies and gentlemen. We need energetic minds and to exit, because also within the precinct, there is a draw for COSAFA, the COSAFA Women's Championship. The draw is happening at exactly 11 o'clock. So she has to pop out the draw. Whoever's going to be drawing in Group A, South Africa is there. Group B, Zambia. And of course, Group C is Namibia. And Gauteng will be the host of that championship. So she has just stepped out. So she will be back again. Don't think, Kuguti, she's decided to go for anything else except business. Now, the roadmap, and I think we've seen some great presentations so far. But what about the roadmap? And somebody who is no stranger within the sporting fraternity, ladies and gentlemen, someone that I've known in my walk of life to have been the heart and soul and the heartbeat and maybe the voice of reason on many, many occasions. I want to introduce to you the Deputy Director General, Recreation, Development and Sport, promotion. Sumaya Khan, please step forward to give us the school sport, the roadmap, ladies and gentlemen. Perfect.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Robert, and thank you for the acknowledgement. Good morning, Minister, Deputy Minister in absentia, Minister Lamola, the Portfolio Committee of Sport, Arts and Culture, all the MECs present, Your Excellency, High Commissioner of Jamaica, good to see you again, Mr. Barry Hendricks, an old friend. You know, Minister, when Mr. Hendricks was talking about all the milestones, I realized I'm very young. So, Barry knows. So thank you very much. And to all the sports federations, everyone, our friends in sport, our partners, and all protocol observed. Minister, I must tell you, I'm sure the sports federations will be happy to see me. We're outside. The last time I was on this very platform, they were actually giving me a lot of bullets because we had not paid them their transfer payments. So they were up in arms. We're in the same situation. Yes, we're in the same situation this year, Minister. We haven't paid them, but we've been working with them and they know the steps that we're taking. And Minister, I must say, when that happened last year, it made the media. It got to the media. And the media put a large photo of me. But that wasn't all, Minister, because on a Sunday morning, my 81-year-old mom was reading the newspaper. She doesn't read anything there. She just saw my picture. And she sends me an SMS, "My child, I'm so proud of you." And I still have the text, Minister. So, sports federations, if you do that more often, my mother will be very proud. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, it's really, really my pleasure to present the school sport roadmap. We've walked a long journey. I've got a very limited time and I won't go into all the details. I've picked up some of the highlights, the salient things that we need to put into this presentation. And we're hoping that a lot of the information will be taken into the commissions. So, ladies and gentlemen, Robert spoke about this. And I think both of us were on the same page as I was preparing this. Because when I was putting this presentation together, I found this little quote in the news, in a media clip, which said, "The new sports minister," and I've copied it as it is so you can see the font and the size and stuff. It's as it came out of the media. It said, "New sports minister Zizi Kodwa vows to prioritize school sports." This was on the 6th of March, 2023 at 22:39. Minister, I think you may have been about 2 or 3 hours already as a minister, and you were making these big statements already at that time. And you said, Minister, that we need to go back to the basics, and I'm talking about school sports. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's quite prophetic that like 6 months down the line, we're sitting here and really trying to make sure that this becomes a reality. In terms of the history, ladies and gentlemen, we've come from a long history. The apartheid sports policy was formulated in 1952 and up to 1976. The change in apartheid policy in terms of international sanctions, so there was no policy in place that because of the sanctions. Then we had a very, very formidable organization called SACOS, and they played a very big role in terms of the delivery of sport, you know, and they coined the phrase no normal sport in an abnormal society between 1971 and 1998. And then we were readmitted into the global competitive sport arena in 1991 to 1994. And with 1994 came democracy. We had an organization delivering school sport, responsible for school sport, which was USASA. Very, very successful in delivering school sport between 1994 and 2004. And then other things happened. SASCOC had a role to play in terms of delivery of school sport or the structure of school sport. But for us, the key is the school sport as a bedrock for sports development. That was started in 2011 and it continues to date. If we're looking at school sport as a critical priority for us as the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture and the bedrock for sports development in the country, ladies and gentlemen, I must indicate that we have the Department of Basic Education and we have a Minister of Basic Education. We have a Department of Sport, Arts and Culture, and we have a Minister of Sport, Arts and Culture. The Minister of Education is responsible for everything inside the school, including sport. The Minister of Sport is responsible for sport all over the country, including inside the school. So I think we must make sure we keep that in mind to say that the Minister of Sport is the custodian of sport in the country. So wherever it takes place, if you're the mountain climber, in the mountain, in the swimming pools, in the dams, on the road, wherever it is, on the tennis courts, the Minister of Sport is responsible for it. Whether you're running on the road, whether in the rural area you're doing recreation, it is the Minister of Sport who is responsible for that. So, ladies and gentlemen, school sport is integrated in the National Sport and Recreation Plan, which was endorsed by the entire sport and recreation sector in the Republic of South Africa in November 2011. And school sport is objective 5.2 of the white paper on sport and recreation. It is intended to maximize access to sport, recreation, and physical education in every school in South Africa. So it is in the white paper. Further, an MOU was signed between the Department of Sport and Recreation at the time and the Department of Basic Education in 2011, and the Minister of Sport and Recreation and the President of SASCOC also signed off the South African Coaching Framework in 2011. And this framework embraces the global processes and standards in the long-term participant development framework, which I think the President also spoke about, and it's inclusive of all stages of sports development. And the long-term participant development provided uniformity within the sports sector. And on the 28th of March 2012, the National School Sports League program was launched at Vlakfontein Grounds in Mamelodi. Our current school sports model, we have a memorandum of understanding between the Department of Basic Education and the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture. There is support for schools code structures. There's a South African Schools Leagues program. There's the Athlete Development Pathway Strategy. We do have sports-focused schools and the Ministerial Sports Bursary. There's a provision for sports equipment and attire. There's a provision for skills development and capacity building. We are aligned with UNESCO programs, the Kazan Action Plan, and participation in MINEPS. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, I heard my colleague Sifiso speak about the MINEPS conference that took place. And just to indicate that the minister was elected as the vice chairperson. Vice president. Okay, the vice president of MINEPS. Yes. Sorry, Minister. Okay, I'm not going to speak through the slide. I think colleague Sifiso went through it, but just to indicate from the DSAC point of view, our responsibility is the district competitions, the provincial eliminations, and the national championships, level 4, 5, and 6 in terms of the MOU between the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture and DBE. In terms of the areas of implementation, we do support the school code structures. There's the local areas in the district, provincial, and the National Schools Codes Committee structures that are tasked with the coordination and implementation of the school sport program. So we do see the district championships, the provincial championships taking place, and all those learners then find their way into the national championships based on their performance. The SA Schools Leagues program, this is what I've been speaking about. from the inter-house and the inter-school area competitions that are done, that are the responsibility of DBE, and the rest of it is with the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture. The athlete development pathway, I think we have a relationship with SASCOC as well as with the provinces in terms of the academies. The sports-focused schools are very specific schools. We have a framework for sports-focused schools. There are criteria for it. And those schools actually, where there are learners, where we identify them as talented learners, they go into sports-focused schools. And it's linked also to the ministerial bursary. You will know, colleagues, that the ministerial sports bursary are given to a limited number of students. We have very limited funding who come out of the school sports program through a talent identification process, and then they receive a bursary from the time they get into grade 8 up to grade 12 for their academic program as well as the sports program. Sports equipment and attire, besides the school sports program, there are other initiatives like our community outreach where sports equipment and attire are provided to schools, and they are done through the provinces towards the poorest of the schools. Again, the capacity building where coaches, technical officials, administrators are skilled. And there is support to the provinces through the DORA. So, ladies and gentlemen, DORA is the Division of Revenue Act, and we get a conditional grant. If we look at our Active Nation unit, we have two main sports-specific programs in the branch. It's Active Nation and it's Winning Nation. Active Nation has school sport, it has community sport, it has active recreation, and it has a big area of provincial coordination. In the provincial coordination, in the whole Active Nation budget, more than 55% of the budget is a conditional grant, and it goes to the provinces. And hence, in the conditional grant framework, 40% of the budget is allocated to school sport. And that's where all that support comes from. Colleagues, the one thing we realize, and I think colleagues also from education realize that, you know, the school sport program, the after-school program, the Wednesday leagues, yes, we may say it's there, but in reality, they are not working. So we needed to look at something else. What is it? How do we now use the skills that we have? We may not have physical education teachers, but we have sports people who have played sport. They are coaches, and they have such a great contribution to make. And hence, the minister then initiated the Sports Ambassadors Program, where we identify and we acknowledge our former sports persons for their past achievements at the highest level of competitions. And Minister, we're very glad that Lucas Hadebe is here. He's one of the sports ambassadors. But importantly, it's not only the sports people, but people in the industry of sport. And Patko Mufani is also here, and he's been an amazing ambassador for us, especially even during the Netball World Cup in terms of the activations. So we have a list of sports ambassadors who have been out in schools, in the communities, doing after-school programs, doing life skills programs, so that, you know, where there's an absence of school sport, we have a plan and we hope to grow that. Where do we get our resources from for school sport? There's national federations funding, and yes, this is a big debate because school sports structure says the federation does not give us money, but it's up to the federation. When funds are allocated, there has to be some funding allocated, ring fence for school sport. The conditional grant framework, I've spoken about it. There's sponsorships and donors, and Sifiso, colleague, spoke about that. And then there's pay to play, where athletes have to also pay for themselves. I think we don't talk about that area of resources, but there are many codes of sport where athletes have to pay to participate, even at school sport level. Just to give an indication, colleagues, you know, a summary of the performance. If we're looking at in the school sport program that we have, We have learners that are playing at district levels. We also have school sports coordinators that are employed through the conditional grant. Schools are provided with equipment and attire. There are learners playing at national championships. There are school sports structures that get support, and there are educators or teachers that are trained. And this just gives you a picture over the years from 2011 right up to now, 2021, 10 years of statistics of the number of learners who are playing at a district level, and the coordinators remunerated, and all of the other things that I've mentioned. So this is the stats. I'm not going to read it, but we're just at the tip of the iceberg. This doesn't even get to 25,000 schools because of the lack of resources. But in terms of the funding, this is the funding that we've allocated to school sport. From 2010 right up to I can't see the last one there, but if you look at it like from our own budget, equitable share is what is appropriated to us as a department, and the conditional grant is what is specifically for school sport in the conditional grant. So you would see it in the first year was 23 million rands. It's now in this financial year 30 million. We've had budget cuts along the way, and ladies and gentlemen, we must also get ready for more budget cuts. So this is the picture we have, but there's definitely going to be budget cuts in the near future. And in terms of the SWOT analysis, what are our strengths in the school sports sector? This is not conclusive. This just picked up some of the highlights. Yes, we're saying school sport funding, but we're not saying it with, really optimism, because we got the money to do something. Because if you look at school sport, yes, it's a priority for us because we believe it's our nursery. We develop talent, we identify talent there to take us into the high performance area. So we have a very small budget, but we do have funding for school sport. And if we had not had that money, we would not have got so many of the gains we've had. They may not be major, but we've had much to gain from that. There's been capacity building opportunities. We've had this good relationship with the sports federations because, Minister, we believe that you cannot have a school sports structure that sits outside the federation. Because, and I always use the example, Minister, that if an athlete is taking part in 100 meters, and if that athlete gets in 8 seconds, the athlete runs and it's a record, who is going to recognize that athlete's performance? It has to be a federation. A federation has to take the initiative to say, this child here, we must register, it's a proper race, the child was registered, World Athletics, here we have, and that must be registered. If we try and do it elsewhere, we will lose our athletes. Our athletes will never get that recognition if they're working outside the federation. So that's very important, Minister. In terms of opportunities, I want to talk about the positive first. Minister, I've spoken about the provision of out-of-school programs. I've spoken about the ambassadors. We had an opportunity which we missed, Minister. But I think it's a fight that I have with my colleagues, Sifiso and Dr. Whittle, that in the PESP was a job creation. The Department of Basic Education had school sport assistants. And there were no assistants. There was nothing, there was no initiative to say we should have had school sport assistants through the PESP funding. And the Department of Basic Education had great accolades. They were an example of good practice of how jobs were created. But we missed an opportunity to get sports assistants out of that program. Social media, yes, we get a lot of presence on social media. We're visible. Teachers as coaches, we have an opportunity to train teachers as coaches. And there's an opportunity of sponsorships because there's a lot of willing partners who want to invest in school sport, but they want a visible, they want a viable school sports system. Our weaknesses, Minister, I think we've spoke about this poor infrastructure, the structured relationship with educators, the lack of jurisdiction on public schools. And then, Minister, the greatest threat to us, if we don't have proper systems, we will never have the leagues. And the leagues are linked to the clubs, that take us into the high performance arena. We have lack of marketing and communication opportunities, lack of resource allocation by DBE, that's also a threat, and the absence of physical education. Minister, you know, I think we may have been speaking to each other somewhere during the presentations, although we didn't talk loudly. Minister spoke about the multipurpose sports courts at Lutai High School. This is a school that Bongi Msomi attended, and this is one of the netball legacy courts. And if you look at the field there, it tells you what the field looked like before the courts. And the other the picture has the 2 courts. For the netball legacy courts, the Sports Trust, our partnership with the Sports Trust, they built 2 courts. One was purely for netball, and the other one was a multi-purpose court for 5 different codes. But this is not the only ones. It's a legacy program, but we have had a long relationship, Minister, as an intervention, because there's no sports facilities, not enough, or not enough to cater for different codes of sport. This is the intervention, and since 2010, we have had this partnership and successfully delivered these multipurpose courts in schools. So this is the same thing. This is Nabib High School in the Northern Cape, and this is in Limpopo. These were all the legacy projects of Netball World Cup. Okay, Minister, I'm not going to go through this. Minister said a lot about the Transformation Charter. The Transformation Charter is a key enabler and an annexure to the National Sport and Recreation Plan. It was part of the documents that were adopted by Cabinet in 2012 as part of the National Sport and Recreation Plan. And here, Minister, I just wanted to quickly go into the fact that school sport, and this is coming out of the transformation reports, Minister. School sport is the ultimate platform from which to transform South African sport from a dominant minority representation to a majority inclusive reality. Suboptimal implementation of the MOU between the DSSC and DBE to align and integrate sport. Ineffective community and school-based sports facility and sports provision. Sports federations' primary focus on only about 1,500 previous Model C schools to the exclusion of 25,000 under-resourced public schools, and increasing tensions between amateur and commercially driven professional sports. Minister, also the eminent persons group in their own findings had indicated that there was an absence of an effective coordinating platform to orchestrate and oversee the implementation of an integrated and aligned school sports strategy. These have been consistently commented on. And also, then there's a need to distinguish the difference between school sport and physical education, which is a standalone subject, and an in-depth situational analysis of the progress of getting this subject at all schools needs to be conducted. Minister, we may not have gained much, but we think all the little gains are really, really worth noting because they've really been big gains for us in the school sport sector. If we look at the school sport championships that we host, there's the summer games, there's the winter championships, and the autumn championships. If we look in 2021, there was a school called Edendale Technical School in Pietermaritzburg. They became the Winter National School Sport Championships. In 2022, the Edendale coach she was called to be the assistant coach of the South African under-17 girls team that won the Region 5 competition in Malawi in December 2022. So she came from a school sport program. In 2022, 3 of the girls and the coach were selected to the South African under-17 team. And in 2023, the star striker, Nobashle Mbelwa, she was selected for a scholarship in Spain through SAFA partnership with La Liga. And in 2023, currently the coach and 4 players have been included in the new under-17 national team. In softball, almost more than half of all the women teams were made up of the national school sport graduates. The Softball South Africa senior women qualified to represent Africa in Spain in July 2023 for the Africa Euro qualifiers. Technical officials had graduated from the school's festivals. They are bursary holders in universities who played in the National School Sport Championships. There was the Softball South Africa's under 18 men were selected mainly at the 2022 Summer National School Sport Championships. They qualified to represent South Africa and Africa in Mexico for the Junior World Cup. And then the under 23 men represented South Africa and Africa in Argentina in April 2023 for the World Cup, with almost all players having played in the National School Sport Championships. So these are the graduates, Minister. If you look at Siyabonga Mabena, he represented Gauteng in the 2021 Winter National School Sport Championships. In December 2022, he won the Region 5 Golden Boot and Player of the Tournament Awards. In April 2023, he made his Sundowns FC debut at the age of 16. He was the youngest player to do so. And in May 2023, he represented South Africa in the Under-17 at the Under-17 African Nations Cup. So, Minister, there is great potential for us in the school sport program. Minister, you've spoken about the theory of change. So, as we gather to consider the objectives of the Indaba, the main outcomes across 5 themes should emerge. One of it is guidelines on policy for DBE and DSAC, the guidelines on the implementation model and protocols, guidelines on stakeholder roles and responsibility, and guidelines on integrated priorities. There should be discussions that should be cross-cutting, or there's cross-cutting themes of ICTS and technology in sport, safeguarding, age cheating, racial discrimination. So, Minister, as Minister has already indicated, we have committed to review the National Sport and Recreation Plan, and this session is the first step towards this review. I thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Sumaya. Please, after that presentation, give a big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. We're getting to the point of the day where we're just going to have a quick break, a quick tea break. But before that, let me just remind members of the media that we're going to make a few individuals available for you to interview in the media space that I'd indicated to you at the start of proceedings. We will have available during this tea break the SASCOG President, Barry Hendricks. We will have available for you one of our ambassadors, the legendary Lucas Khatebe, otherwise known as? Sorry, I can't hear a word you're saying. Thank you so much. We'll just have a quick sip of water there, my friend. All will be okay. Tebogo Moloye, another ambassador, is also going to be available for these interviews. His nickname is a bit too long, which we can't say the same way. So we'll park that one. The big boss, Athletics South Africa, who's also here, James Molloy, will be available for the interviews as well, and including the High Commissioner of Jamaica as well. So those will be available. So don't start hesitating and starting to ask, oh, what about the minister and the deputy? They will be available, but during the lunch break. So the tea break, those are the individuals that you can have access to. But for now, though, thank you so much. We'll take